Welcome to this session about the new conjure operator for Red Hat OpenShift. So we're going to start fresh for this demonstration, and we're going to install a new conjure, and we're going to connect it to OpenShift. For that purpose, I have a few things that have been already prepared, and we're going to go through them very quickly. But the idea is really to run the conjure container within this host. So I have a Docker runtime that is running here. Doesn't have anything in there. All I did was to load the Docker image that we're gonna be using, which is right here. And I'm on a version 12.4.0, which is, as of today, the latest one. I've also installed the conjure CLI, which is right here, an OpenShift client, CLI client right here. And I am logged in as my user, my personal user here, the instance being hosted locally. But it is a full-fledged OpenShift version 4.8, which is right here. And the idea now is to use what is the latest and greatest way of doing of setting this installation up. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start by building the leader node. And for this, I've already created a few files that are going to be shared using the volume options for Docker. But let's have a quick look at what's already in there. So if I go to OPT Cyber Secrets Manager later, in there we have a few things. This is coming directly from the doc site. I've already put the Docker security profile right in the security directory right here. As you can see. Also, I've already put the configuration file in this specific directory, which is going to be mounted into the container itself. So let's have a quick look. There we go. And this is going to allow us to enable two of the authenticators. So one by default, which is the authn, which allows us to log in using password, and the second one, which is the Kubernetes authenticator, which is the way of suppressing the secret zero in the use case of Kubernetes. This is not only used to enable the deployment of followers within Kubernetes, but it also is going to be used so we can authenticate workloads using the same authenticator with Conjure, and therefore we won't be needing any sort of credential for us to log or to authenticate workloads coming from those specific namespaces within that OpenShift setup. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the first command that is going to allow us to. So I've already built the required commands right here, but we're going to go through them together. So for this, I'm basically just mounting. So it is the stat. I'm exposing a few ports, as you can see right here. So these ports are the 443, 444, 5432, and 1999. These are default ones. They are also, again, coming from the official documentation. And I've mounted all of those directories that we've seen earlier on. So right now, the container is running, but it is not configured. Like, it doesn't have a role. So we're going to turn it into what we call leader or master. And for that, the command comes like this. So we're going to execute within. This is where we're going to define this node as being, again, as I just said, the master or the leader. And we're going to define a few things around that, which are the host name, potentially the alternative names in case of real install where we're going to have load balances, etc. And finally, the admin password. So this, I always suggest to create one with a dummy one and then change it afterwards. at least that can be automated and simplified, at least for the very first steps. There we go. So it's going to run. It's going to take a couple of minutes to stand up. So let's give it a bit of time. And as I said, it takes a little bit of time, a couple of minutes, but not more, to have the Conjure fully running as a leader node. So after this, we can have a quick look at the current status of the node. So that's https:// conjure node 001/info or help. Let's start with the help and -k. And as you can see, this has an overall status of OK, and it is having this role master. So it is acting as a master for the cluster, for potentially what we're going to build as a cluster behind the scenes. OK, let's have a look also at the info. So for the info, as you can see, it's gonna tell us what's available, what's not. The authenticators, which are what we are really interested in, because they are the way of suppressing the secret zero. So as you can see, we have a list right here of what's available and what's installed in this setup, and what is configured. And then here, what we've already enabled using the configuration that I've showed earlier is Kubernetes Authenticator with an endpoint specifically for OCP. So OCP in this case is going to point out to my specific cluster. So we could have other Kubernetes authenticators enabled right here, but they will need to have different names than OCP. So I've decided to name for this demo my cluster OCP. It will need to be reflected in all the configurations / policies that we're going to have right here. All right, so that's it. Let's have a look now at the web UI. Should, yeah, reload. There we go. And I'm going to use my user and password that I've set. It is a fresh and empty instance, nothing has been installed. So you can see that the host, layers, users, secrets, etc., everything is empty. I'm going to take this couple of moments to install and configure the Conjure CLI, because we're going to be using it to load a few things. One of them is the policies, and also the secret values. So we're going to use the CLI for that. And before we do that, we need to initialize the CLI. So that's Conjure init, if I'm not mistaken. And it's going to ask me to point out HTTPS to my Conjure setup. All right. So it tells me, is it all right to trust the certificate? So the answer is yes. And there we go. Let's log in. And it's going to ask me about my username and password. Okay, so now I successfully logged into Conjure. So if I have a quick check, Conjure, who am I? It's going to tell me who am I. And okay. Now, if I Conjure list, I'm going to have the same results that we've had from the web UI, which is empty. So that's it. We have a fully functional Conjure install. The CLI is configured now. I am now going to start configuring what's going to be used to stand up this follower or this read-only replica within OpenShift. And to do that, first of all, we need to create a few things. Let's head on to the follower. So these are files that I've already prepared, but thanks to the operator, we're going to use much less than what we used to have. And the reason behind it, a lot of the heavy lifting is being done by the operator itself. But we will need a few things just to simplify the configuration even more. So one of those things is the resources. So the Kubernetes resources I'm going to need to create on the OpenShift side. And this is basically just including the namespace, the service account I'm going to be using there. Thereafter, I'm going to require a cluster role with all those things that you can see right here with all those rules, and these are uh, the things that we need, so we can inject the key pair that is signed by the CA sitting in Conjure, so we can trust whatever comes from the specific pods where we're going to inject these key pairs. Okay, so from the so these are the rules, and we need to bind those rules and this cluster role to our service account. So Conjure will be able to inject those key pairs directly within the pods. Okay, so let's go ahead. OC create /f k8 as authenticator resources, and there we go. So we just created everything that is needed for the time being on the OpenShift side. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and install the operator on Conjure. So I'm going to go ahead and open the operator tab on the administrator perspective in OpenShift Web UI, and I'm going to click on Operator Hub. I'm going to simply search for either Conjure or CyberArk. Let's pick up Conjure. Okay, so I'm going to click on the operator and hit install. So it's going to tell me, it's going to ask me if I would like to install that on a specific or on a on all namespaces. So that goes into default. So I'm going to pick the specific namespace, and by default it picks up Conjure, and I'm just going to hit install. It's going to take a little while to install the operator, so I'm going to leave it to do that, maybe accelerate the video a little bit. So here it is. It's fully running now. I'm sorry, installed. So let's have a look at the operator itself. You have, most importantly, a link to the documentation on how to use it. Without further ado, let's go ahead and start the configuration. So I'm gonna go to the files that I've already prepared on the Conjure policy side. So let's have a quick look at all of those. So first of all, we're gonna start to have a look at the Kubernetes Authenticator web service. So what is it? So this is a policy. The policy is nothing more than a YAML file that describes how Conjure is supposed to behave. So we're gonna do pretty much everything with those policies. So from defining variable locations, defining the host or non-human identities, how we group them, how we give them access in read, write, etc., and how we manage all of that. And everything is as code, as you can see. So this can fit quite nicely into a Git repository and can be part of a GitOps process that could simplify the integration of the security team within the process of validating things that will get at some point promoted in production for your environments, etc., So it can fit quite nicely from that sense. But I would like to, for the purpose of this demo, again, this is to enable the Kubernetes Authenticator OCP, right? And for that matter, we will create a trust at this level on the Conjure side, meaning we're gonna have Conjure to trust OpenShift and that specific OpenShift cluster that I am working on right now. And for that, we will require a service account token, the CA of that cluster, the CA certificate chain of that cluster. So when Conjure talks back to the API URL, it can verify that it is the right one. So there is a certificate pinion running behind that. And finally, there are a couple of other keys or variables that we'll be using for the process of generating those certificates that will be injected in those pods. So when they authenticate back to Conjure, it will be a TLS mutual authentication that have been validated according to what policies we've defined. And we're going to have a look at that. All right, so let's go ahead and load this policy into Conjure. So that's Conjure policy load -v. So policies, this is a very important point within Conjure. Everything is defined as in a tree, right? Just like a file system within Linux is start with a root or a slash. So we're going to have a root branch from everything will start. So we specify -b root and then we're going to load potentially the file that we've just created. So this is the idea. So you create that tree of policies and the RBACs and definition of identities, etc., of non-human and human identities, how to group them, all of that can end up as a definition of a tree, so you can separate or segregate between teams or environments like QA or dev or you name it. But basically, that's the idea. So it's so flexible. So let's have a look at the Kubernetes Authenticator web service. So let's load that thing up, and let's have a quick look at Conjure list right after this. So as you can see, we've created a few things. Amongst those things, the root, which everything starts from. So we just notified it as a root policy, and everything is built from that root. So everything is omitted here because root is not going to be sitting everywhere. It is omitted, but everything starts from this root. But in here we have our Kubernetes Authenticator, and it is specific to Conjure. So whenever you see Conjure in here, it is internal configuration of Conjure. The Kubernetes Authenticator is now defined for this OCP. What I would like also to have a look at is the curl of this info. And we're going to see that now Kubernetes Authenticator for OCP is now also configured. Earlier on, it was just authn. Now we have both. And that's it. So that's the plan. There is another thing that is quite important, which is the seed fetcher. So the seed fetcher web service is specific, again, to the follower and how you allow the auto scale up and down of your followers. So those read-only replicas in the context of Kubernetes. So I'm going to go ahead and have a look at the seed generation web service, and we're going to define a set of consumers that are going to be able to call that Conjure seed generation endpoint. Okay, so let's go ahead. Conjure policy load dash b root dash f seed generation. There we go. There is a final thing, which is the follower. We will require to have those things. So this is how we're going to authenticate the follower coming from and restrict it basically to what we need to restrict it on. So we will have an identity called Conjure follower. So this Conjure follower is how our follower is going to present itself, its name, right? It needs in this policy to come from a namespace within our trusted OpenShift. It needs to come from that namespace that we specified right here. Also, it needs to use a token that is only valid for the service account called Conjure SA. That's what I created slightly earlier. And finally, but this is not the exhaustive list. There are a few others. I suggest you have a look at the documentation if you'd like to see what other parameters can we restrict on. But in this case, the authentication container name needs to be called configurator. Okay, so once we have that, and that the Conjure follower comes back from OpenShift trying to log in, if it doesn't meet all of those criteria, Conjure will just say, no, you're not going to be authorized to log in. So what's also interesting right here to see is that this host that we just saw here, we're going to authorize it to be part of the consumers that we've defined earlier on of the Conjure Kubernetes OCP cluster, and also the seed generation consumers. So that and the last policy that we've just loaded. So this host is going to be part of those two consumer groups and will be able to fetch secrets from those two services. So that's it. Let's go ahead. Conjure load policy load dash b root again, and then dash f the follower. So now we have a few things loaded in Conjure. So, and most importantly, we have those variables that we've defined right here. And for the time being, they're all empty, right? So Conjure can't do much. It doesn't know what is the API endpoint that it needs to call back when it comes to this OCP cluster. It does not know what is the certificate chain that needs to validate this API against it, and it does not know what is the current service account that it needs to use as a token to authenticate next to this OCP cluster. Also, there are a couple of things that need to be mentioned right here, which are the certificate, CA, and key. So these are going to be used to enroll anything that has passed the validation of those parameters that we've defined. Once they've actually they have been validated, Conjure is going to be able to generate then a key pair and inject it within the pod. So for the next communications, it's going to use this TLS2 authentication rather than using anything else. So that's the plan and that's the idea. Same concept will apply to the workloads themselves. Same type of annotations will allow us to define that this specific application will only be authenticated when it comes from this namespace with this service account, etc., etc., etc. So the same concepts. All right, so then what we need to do is basically retrieve those values from OpenShift, load them up. These are specific to Conjure. They don't come from OpenShift. And I've already created those things right here. So if I go up and I go to the certs, so I've created a CA and then a certificate and a key. So these two we can directly load using those two commands right here. So I'm gonna grab this one. So here I'm gonna I'm just going to point out that we're going to match. This is how we set up a value of a variable defined in Conjure. So either using the CLI, we can do that also using the web UI. But what's important here is the path. So we define this path, and you can come here and have a look at how it is defined. And it is Conjure authn k8s OCP, Conjure authn k8s OCP, Kubernetes assert. So this needs to match this one. So this needs to come from Kubernetes or OpenShift API. So let's go ahead and first load what we already have, and then we're going to focus on the other two. So these should be these ones. Okay. So Conjure authn k8s OCP CA key. So that's the key, and it needs to be somewhere coming from here. Cat. All right. Oh, I need to specify -v for the value. Okay, so I successfully loaded that key in here. I'm gonna have a quick look at the web UI and to show you how it looks really like in a graphical mode. So let's log in again. Okay, as you can see, I've created a few secrets. So secrets equal variables, and what I've just loaded is this one. So if I have a look, this is my private key, and that's it. So this I did. All right, let's carry on. I'm gonna now load the cert. Change that to cert. And now again, I've just loaded my certificate, which is right here. Okay, this is the one. Okay, and there it is. All right, now we need to go grab what's coming from OpenShift into our Kubernetes. And for this, we're gonna require a few things. So first of all, let's go ahead and type OC get our OC status. That will give us the, of course, it should be logged in. Okay, so as I've logged in, you can see that the API endpoint is this one. So let's go ahead and load this one in our API. So that should be somewhere here. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Now let's go ahead and go grab the token. So as you can see, I'm going to grab from the Conjure namespace the Conjure SA, which is the service account that I've created, and just to grab the right name for the token name. And if I echo $token secret name, this is it. And we're going to grab its value, put it as a base 64 decoded within a variable, which we'll then load within Conjure. So if I echo this $token secret, this is the right variable. Now, let's take this value and load it into Conjure. Okay, and the final thing is the chain. So for that, I'm gonna extract the certificate OpenSSL. I already have the command right here. So OpenShift uses SNI to expose the API. So the way you approach the URL of the API may not expose the same certificate. So what I do is usually grab the one using the server name right here, but I'm also going to use the one that isn't gonna expose without the SNI basically. So let's go ahead and do it. Chain, all right, and then I'm gonna append rather than overwrite, and this time I'm gonna just the server name from the command, and I'm gonna just make sure that I don't have values that are the same, otherwise we'll just remove them. So as we can see, okay. Okay, so the last certificate is indeed different from this two, and as you can see, we have only 4 certificates, and they're all different. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be loading inside my last variable, which is this one. Okay, and cat chain. Okay, let's have a quick look. Cert. Now on Conjure, everything have been properly done. So let's now go ahead and create the last thing that was remaining from our follower configuration, the config map. So let's have a quick look at the config map itself. So these are coming from the old-fashioned way. So if you're not using operator, this is how you do it. Basically, you create potentially a config map, or you use directly environment variables within your manifest to deploy the followers. They come from the follower. You'll see that it does a lot of heavy lifting for you. But there are a couple of things that are quite important to note that we could reuse the same way. So we could strip a lot of things, but I prefer to load everything just in case I need something. But what I potentially need is this one, the SSL Conjure SSL certificate, which represents the certificate of my node. Therefore, this needs to be replaced, by the way. So I'm just going to replace it right here. Yeah. Again. There we go. So I'm going to keep that right here, so there's nothing really secret about it anyway. And we're going to go ahead now and go to the OpenShift operator that we just did. So I'm going to fire it up again from scratch. Let's create instance. Okay, so here the name of my follower is going to be called Conjure follower. It is so we don't have to care about the images anyway, because it's already done for us. And the Conjure account though is going to be Cyber. This is what we have in here, Conjure account. Then we will have the authenticator service ID, and this is how we named our cluster in Conjur, and in my case, I called it OCP. The application identity, or the non-human identity, in our case, is called host/Conjur follower. The CA certificate itself, so this time I'm going to load it directly from my follower config map, and that's what I've created earlier on, and the name of that key is Conjur SSL certificate. There we go. And right here, we need to point out to the QDN of my leader node without the HTTPS. Finally, the Conjur config file, and this time again is already loaded in the same config map, as you can see right here. It is this one, and it is and the key is named conjur.yaml file. So let's go ahead, conjur.yaml file, and load it directly from the follower CM. Okay, so all this is fine, but we need a final check because I've named my service account not in a default way, and I would like to make this verification, which is indeed a good thing to do because my service account is not called Conjur follower, but Conjur SA. And I believe that's it. So let's go ahead and hit create. Conjur then, the Conjur follower operator is gonna start building the pod. And if we go ahead and have a look at the pod initialization, it is running and it does everything that needs to be done. So the init container have done its job, and now we have been successfully authenticated, and Conjur node is now, the Conjur container is now running. So as you can see, we have 5 of them already up, and we still need to wait for it to finish building, but we're almost there. So let's give it a couple of minutes. So there we go, 3, and 5, and there it is. I hope you enjoyed watching this demo, and I'm quite thrilled with the way it got simplified, the way we can deploy followers within OpenShift. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. So yeah, don't hesitate. My name again is Amin Alumami. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, and yeah, have a nice day.